The Batman Arkham games stand as one of the best iterations of Batman in video game form. From the beat-em-up combat to the legendary cast of voice actors, these are the games you want to play if you like Batman. They're also a bit controversial on the Switch, mostly with the third game's questionable performance in certain areas, resulting in people really only talking about that game and not the others. Because of that, I will be splitting my coverage of the trilogy in two. In this first iteration, we will be exploring the first two games of the series and not touching the third until later. Here is my review of Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City for the Nintendo Switch. When it comes to story, these two games are about Batman being trapped in areas with many of his famous foes. In the first game, he escorts Joker to Arkham Asylum only to find himself trapped when Joker frees the inmates and causes chaos, seeking something known as the Titan Project. Batman must then trek across the asylum, taking on his old foes and put a stop to the Joker's plan. Then we get to the second game. Arkham City has a similar premise, but much larger. Taking place after Asylum, a large chunk of Gotham City has been turned into a prison known as Arkham City. Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, is taken into that prison and must traverse around going after the Joker and the remnants of what happened in the first game. Now these stories are really good, but not just for the plot itself. It's an interesting comic booky story, but it's carried by the voice cast, especially with Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill reprising their roles as Batman and the Joker. When it comes to gameplay, these are 3D beat-em-up adventure games with puzzle and open-world elements thrown in. As you play, you'll be jumping and gliding around, pummeling goons and villains in beat-em-up style combat, and doing a lot of detective work as Batman, the world's greatest detective. Now the Switch versions of these games come with all DLC released for other platforms, including the Wii U exclusive armored Batman suit from Arkham City. It also includes previously available cheat codes like the ability to choose any costume in Arkham City on your first playthrough. With main progression, these games are kind of story driven. In Asylum, you have limited access to the building, pushed forward by story progression to find NPCs, figure out what the Joker is up to, and slowly unlock more areas. There is a bit of a hub that eventually unlocks for you to give you exploration to different sectors, but a lot of it's pretty linear. Though the systems the game has does make it a little bit more fun with the exploration you do have, like using the grappling hook to swing around high areas to scope things out and being able to tackle enemies in different ways, be it straight up brawling or going for the stealth route. Arkham City, on the other hand, is an open world game. You have the main story pointing you to a particular area, but you have this huge explorable city having main story bits, but also a lot of optional side missions, offering special upgrades that you don't get by just doing the main story. It also switches perspectives from time to time between Batman and Catwoman, offering different takes and events as the story goes forward. Oddly enough, the main gameplay loop feels pretty similar between the two games, despite Asylum feeling like a much more contained, almost horror-like adventure, and City being far larger with its open world. They both also have a mix of puzzles and combat as you go through each area. You have different tools to use on various parts of the environment and use detective mode to open locked doors and solve mysteries, letting you see things you can interact with and guiding you to puzzle solutions. While it's not as exciting as the combat, I do find it fitting since Batman is, outside of his combat, a detective. Speaking of, let's talk about the combat. Arkham uses a beat-em-up style of fighting almost like the Assassin's Creed series. You go into groups of enemies and do physical attacks and can counter when enemies are about to attack you. It's a big game of crowd control, being able to quickly counter enemies and dodge away from larger ones that can't be countered. And it's a really fun system, especially when you combine it with the gliding and grappling, showing Batman slowly gliding down to take out enemies from the sky. Next up is content and length. Despite Arkham City being so much more open with more exploration, both of these games are about 10 to 12 hours long apiece. And after finishing the story, each one has special little DLC like Harley Quinn's Revenge and Catwoman's Adventure for Arkham Asylum to bring that 10 to 12 hours closer to 15. Next is presentation, the biggest topic of controversy for this trilogy. Visually, they look pretty good. The models are nice and smooth, there's plenty of detail, and it doesn't really get blurry when going into handheld mode. The fact that the games are so dark also helps to hide any blemishes on the models. Performance is also good, but not fantastic. Both of these games run at 30 FPS, but have fairly frequent drops into the high 20s. It's nothing horrible or unplayable, but the drops do happen pretty often. though if you're more of a portable player, you will see fewer drops in handheld mode. While this isn't perfect, I would call this level of performance acceptable, especially for the more open world Arkham City. And then we get to battery life. Asylum and City will give the original and light models a battery range of 2 to 3.5 hours, while the V2 and OLED models get 5.5 to 7 hours. In conclusion, Batman's first 2 Arkham adventures come to the Switch in decent form. Now on the downside, there are a fair amount of frame drops into the 20s, but they aren't anything crazy and didn't disrupt my enjoyment of the experience. Outside of those frame drops are 2 great beat-em-up adventures with Batman, the Joker, and the rest of the crew. Reviews to go rates Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham City for the Nintendo Switch an 8.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.